I went to Suriname before the World Cup, and Suriname are a very, very small football nation. Never been to a World Cup, but they do have half a chance of making 2026 because of the expanded nature and because you have three teams that automatically qualify with USA, Canada, and Mexico. And I asked their president of their local football association what he made of Infantino. I was like, look, a lot of us from a distance who sort of cover FIFA think this guy, is pretty crass at times, pretty insensitive. And I was like, what does a country like Suriname make of Gianni Infantino? And he said, well, Gianni's my great friend. He's been to visit twice. There's a plaque on the wall outside this very, very small FA building, which says unveiled by Gianni Infantino, some local football pitches. And the thing that FIFA have done for Suriname that's very important is when Suriname play in things like pre-qualifying or friendlies against, Haiti or countries that are local in some way, they were finding the costs incredibly burdensome, incredibly difficult to go and do 2 or 3 days to do the plane travel, the hotels, to get players who might be playing in Europe over to Suriname in Central South America. And FIFA expanded that pot of money. And that is basically that will lock in Suriname's vote forever, really, for Infantino. There is another story about Suriname, which is that Infantino's faced sort of inquiries, which Matt might be able to speak more about, with regards to a flight to Suriname a few years ago as well. But I think that's why you do have these very, very small nations who all have one vote now, basically saying, well, okay, he's a bit crass on the big international stage, but he does just about enough to look after us.
Yeah, at some point in all this, Laura, everyone has to understand that whilst you're constantly meant to look at the bigger pig and the greater good and whatever, self-interest has to play a part at some level.
Yeah, it does. And one of the big things Infantino was keen to get across in Rwanda was how much money FIFA as an organisation is making. And it's been phenomenally successful on that front. And if that money is trickling down to these smaller nations, then of course they're gonna back him to continue what he's doing. I think it's a wider question really of what we want the World Cup to be. Do we want the minnows to get there and make money and have their chance in the spotlight, or do we actually want it to be the same old names, the same old teams, and the players we all know about?
Well, I always use an example, Laura, as growing up, England used to put 8 or 9 past Turkey, for example, in the early and mid 80s. Turkey, absolute minnow. And you fast forward to what was it 2002 World Cup? They were semi-finalists, and through that time there was an expanded Euros and so on and so forth. So in some ways, whilst this does seem a ridiculously sized tournament, the benefit for some of these countries will be seen long after I'm working on podcasts. It'll be in 2050 you might see the benefit for a Suriname.
Yeah, that's it. And maybe we do just have to sort of suck up the fact that in women's football it's always leveled, that because there are so few elite teams, that you do get your 13-0s, you do get your 10-0s, and they're incredibly dull to watch. And maybe we have to suck that up in men's football at World Cup level for a little bit to bring up those smaller nations on. But because I think those, it won't be 13-0 obviously, but I think those chasms of quality will happen with 48 teams. It's just got to. The women's World Cup's got 32 this time. Haiti are in England's group. There's a risk there that could be a cricket score. But as Adam says, and I think he's right, you've sort of got to take that for the long-term game potentially.
The biggest complaint, Matt, is surely just it sort of, well, on the one hand, it feels slightly unmanageable that 40 more games, 104 games in total, but also the fact that it doesn't matter whether you have 16 three-team groups or now what they're going to do of, what was it, 12 4-team groups.
Yeah.
You're still going to have, well, one, it's a bit of a clumsy mechanic because you're going to have 8 third-place teams going through. And secondly, you're still going to end up with quite a few meaningless games, aren't you?
Yeah. Look, it's not an ideal tournament if you're designing it from a sort of structure point of view, because you're right. It's a loss of games to only boot out 16 of them, right? Because you've got to sort of manufacture this 32 round of 32. So in some ways, we play a lot of games to get to a really good, quite old-fashioned cup format, 32, 16, 8, 4. And I think people will find that great and exciting if they're still watching it. It makes me think of like Rugby World Cups, which are very, very long and they are attritional affairs. But that's because they need quite a long time between games. Football hasn't quite got that excuse, but because it's jamming so many teams in, I think the length of it will be interesting. It's one of those things I don't think we'll know until we see it. I was sort of mentioning it to mates of mine at the weekend, and they were like, "Yeah, but we're all going to watch, aren't we?" In the same way that we somehow got through those 4 games a day in Qatar. We all watched. What I think,
but some will be watched kind of as wallpaper.
Yeah. No, I think so.
Whereas the majority in a 32 team are probably watched with a bit more intent.
Yeah, I agree. I would agree with that. But like I said, I think it's just going to be one of those things that we won't really know until we've been through one. I think probably the biggest reason that they correctly went from 16 times 3 to 12 times 4 is to bring back more meaningful, more games Jeopardy, right? So you were in the 16 times 3, you were losing one of the most exciting 4 or 5 days of Qatar, where you had, I think it was 4 days in a row of 4 games, all 4 teams in each group having sort of simultaneous kickoffs and lots happening. Remember this, was it Spain, Germany, that Costa Rica day where teams were in and out, and the group was changing on a sort of almost minute by minute basis. That was exciting. And when you had game 16 times 3, well, you had one team sitting out watching it, and you had also the possibility of collusion as well between the 2 teams that did have a final fixture, getting the fixture result they wanted to boot, to get the other team out. So I think they've got there eventually. It does mean a load more games, and you're right. There's a danger of too much being a good thing. I'm like, oh my God, how do we do all this? And there's lots of headaches to be done, a lot of headaches to be sorted out. So do they need another venue? At the moment it was going to be sort of 75% in the US, or sorry, it was 75% in the US, 60, when it was 80 games, it's going to be 60 games in the US, 10 in Canada, 10 in Mexico. Do they tweak that? Do they have to add another venue, which brings cost? So there's going to be lots of travel. Yeah, loads of things to sort out. But I think the format is better than it was.
I also don't think you'll end up, we're talking about sort of these minnows getting in. You might get 1 or 2. But if you think from a European point of view, there were some pretty big countries that weren't actually at the World Cup. Think about, was Sweden there? No. Norway?
Italy,
right?
So the way to think about it is Haaland wasn't there, Ibrahimovic wasn't there, Nigeria weren't there, Mo Salah wasn't there, Chile wasn't there. So Infantino's made this point when asked about quality. He's like he'll list off like 10 big teams that weren't there with stars. That's the other thing, with stars.
Ibrahimovic can't still be going by the time we get to 20. Blimey.
Yeah, I know.
Go on, Adam. Finish your point there.
No, that was my point. My point was that we're kind of all worrying about these are all going to be non-fixtures, and you will get some of that. But I think broadly, from a Europe, South America, Africa point of view, I do think it will just be countries that we have seen at World Cups before. What it will do is mean the qualifying is just utterly awful.
Yeah.
I mean, it's already awful. It will be even worse.
But your point about stars is absolutely right. That's what Infantino, that's what FIFA want. They want the big names there because that's how people follow football. We saw it. We saw it in Qatar, didn't we? With all the names of shirts on.
Yeah.
That's what people want to watch. They're not bothered about what formation Argentina are playing. They just want to see Messi.
I think
go on, Matt. Sorry, go on.
Well, I think the qualifying point. You are diluting the quality, the importance of qualifying, and I think that is a possible unintended consequence or a knock-on effect that maybe FIFA will want to have a look at, because that Suriname point that Adam was making about what's important for them. Well, qualifying tournaments are actually quite important for them. There's whole parts of the world that doesn't play enough football, doesn't have enough meaningful fixtures. And one of the things that often gets said about Europe is, you've stopped playing friendlies against us. Europe has now come up with this Nations League tournament. Again, it's sort of kind of putting a big ring fence, almost like this gated community. We're getting richer and richer and richer. And what FIFA is trying to do, and it annoys people here and it annoys players and players unions, and but it's got this point. Well, look, Europe's galloping away. They've stopped sharing that wealth through fixtures, because they said that fixtures were rubbish, and the clubs didn't like them. So we've invented this little tournament that suits us. And one of the things that, let's say, CONCACAF has, or Africa has, or Asia has, is they've still got qualifying tournaments, and they are their best fixtures, their best TV money. But by expanding the World Cup, you do kind of dilute the quality of that. So there's a little bit of kind of, balancing act going on. And that's why it's so important that Infantino at these annual congresses absolutely hammers home the point, guys, this is how much money I was giving you every year in 2016. This is how much I'm giving you now, every year, all of you. Our money, your money. Look at our revenues, up, 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 up. So he's constantly reinforcing that point. You're all getting more money, sevenfold. When I came in 2016, he dished out about $250,000 per member association. It's 2 million-ish now. And we're about to go into a new World Cup cycle, because all of FIFA's budgets are done on World Cup cycles, where they're going to double it again. So Qatar was really successful. The next one's going to be pretty much twice.
It has to be a positive for the mid-tier countries who will provide a bit of competition.
Yeah, definitely. And Morocco were the standout team in Qatar. And I think it helps in terms of 2026 that you've got 3 host nations that, aren't going to be outclassed either, because, people switched off from watching Qatar pretty quickly. But, more African teams. They absolutely brought it alive, that tournament. Absolutely, that's got to be a good thing. And back to the original point, maybe we do see things as Western Europeans too often, but at the same time they're often the teams with the stars that people want to see.